source has caught the imagination of all stakeholders, owing to its versatility, the different ways you can produce it, the different ways you can use it, the different ways you can carry it, the energy independence and energy security that it promises to renewable-rich countries, and its ability to contribute greatly to decarbonizing hard-to-abate sectors. Is this a bubble waiting to burst, or is this the missing link that we have been waiting for in the decarbonization pathways, especially for hard-to-abate sectors? Or does the truth lie in between? I'm Anvesha Thakkar. I'm a partner with KPMG India, an industry lead for clean energy. I'm also the global co-lead for energy transition with KPMG's Global Decarbonization Hub. Today, I will be talking about hydrogen and whether this is a game changer as it is promising to be. I'm looking forward to hearing from my esteemed panel, which is not only neck deep, but tip of the hair deep in hydrogen and the derivative segment. They are at the front and center in shaping the green hydrogen story in India. I take great pleasure in introducing them. Mr. Gupta, my first question is to you. Is green hydrogen the silver bullet or the Swiss Army knife that it is made out to be? Or is it a complement to other energy sources?
So thanks, Anvesha. I think first of all, hydrogen is going to become a very important energy source, which is going to deliver future energy needs. Now, but it's a bit different when we take it to developed countries or emerging countries. Like developed countries, say energy versus energy, whereas emerging economies like India, where the basket is so large because we are growing very fast, energy needs are very low, we will be able to accommodate all energies, be it e-mobility, electricity, hydrogen, even traditional source of oil and gas. So in India, hydrogen would complement all other renewable energy sources. Now, particularly hydrogen is very important in hard-to-abate sectors, and there is no other way except hydrogen for decarbonizing these sectors like aluminium, steel, refineries, fertilizers, petchem. And if you look at mobility space, I think both electric mobility as well as hydrogen would have their own space. Of course, there will be some overlap, but both will find its space. And if I look at from a number perspective, India today produces around 7 million tons of hydrogen. And as per TERI, it is going to become 24 million by 2050. So from that perspective, hydrogen is a very important emerging source of energy, which is going to remain so. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjeev. I think that's an important aspect from a developing country's perspective. It is an important stepping stone, but we do need all the energy sources in the energy basket to meet the needs of a growing country. Kapil, my next question is to you. What, in your view, are the principal levers to get to the dollar dream for green hydrogen?
Good that you have said green hydrogen instead of in low carbon hydrogen, because I would like to address that better than in low carbon hydrogen. But, even our chairman has given a vision of 1-1-1, where he believes that India would be number one exporter, achieving the energy security. And we would achieve green hydrogen at $1 a kg in next 1 decade. So, and on similar lines of your question, we all know where it stands today. And daunting task of bringing it from where we want it to be possibly. And all of us have been working as an industry towards figuring out what are the levers towards achieving that. Some of the major levers, we know what goes in the production cost of green hydrogen. And the majority of that is possibly the reduction in the cost of renewable electricity. So how do we possibly achieve a solution which works towards figuring out an electrolysis process and providing a renewable power to that? It cannot be just one source of renewable power. And how do we mix that source to achieve and still reduce the overall cost of renewable electricity, which possibly takes majority of the reduction within the achieving of that dollar a dream kind of thing. The next set of things would all be possibly electrolyzer related, because we know what is the capex for installing an electrolyzer, so possibly by 2030, where we want it to be. And then there are improvements in the efficiency of electrolyzers, possibly in range of 65 to 75 upwards of 85 to 90% kind of an efficiency improvements in a decade. And then there are full load hours for those also. How do we make it work towards, how do we combine solar and wind and possibly with an element of storage so that we can make it work full load hours and improve efficiency as well. Then there will be an improvement in the lifetime of electrolyzer so that you are able to get to a level where instead of 10 years, which most people are saying is the lifetime of once installed, can we go up to 20, 25 years like what we have in lifetime or possibly in renewable energy project duration as well. So how do we achieve that? And then there will be an element as we progress and mature as an industry, the weighted average cost of capital also will come down. The simple reason is these projects will come out of a pilot kind of a project to a major scale. Many players are talking gigawatt level installations, and some of them have now converted those dreams to possibly talking of how many million tons of green hydrogen or ammonia. So that will then reduce the way we see the associated project finance cost, which is with the green hydrogen project. So some of these levers will help in achieving the dream of $1 kind of in per kg.
As you rightly pointed out, Kapil, I think renewable energy in our analysis forms almost 65 to 70% of the cost of generation of hydrogen, and that really becomes the key lever. The other levers that you spoke about are also extremely important, including efficiency, utilization, or the load of the electrolyzer definitely makes a lot of impact. So I think the point you made about using different renewable energy sources, hybridizing, so that you also get the load factor up, I think that also becomes very important. So all very pertinent points. Vineet, I'll turn to you. Electricity forms the biggest portion of the generation, as we just discussed. While the central government's policy is strong to bring down costs through provision of banking, transmission, waivers, etc., what do you see as the actual challenges on the ground for developers?
So first, I will address your first two questions. I think energy transition to really happen, we have to learn to pay the fair prices. The fundamental driver that changed the renewable energy cost to lower than fossil fuel is because renewable energy technologies follows the learning curve, which means that each doubling of cumulative installed capacity, their prices decline by the same fraction if you look at the last decade. Whereas the prices from electricity from fossil fuel does not follow the learning curve because you have raw material which is controlled by countries and large players, and they don't reduce the price of fossil fuel that way. But for a greener planet and for world to go towards adoption of green hydrogen and its variant like green methanol, green ammonia, or SAF as the fuel, we should let the real price be discovered and the technology advancement happen in the true fashion so that it's sustainable, it's safe, and it kind of makes a fair enough profit for all the stakeholders. So only one country does not dominate in this space like what has happened in the solar space, and that's where you are vulnerable to their policies and their market leadership. So my request to you would be that in the sessions, don't put pressure on hydrogen at $1 so soon. Let the industry develop and let the industry develop by right type of developers across the world, and let real price be discovered. And I'm very confident like what has happened in the energy space, in the renewable energy space, similar pattern will happen on the green hydrogen, green ammonia, green methanol, etc. Coming back to India, as we know that India is run in its provincial government, and power is a concurrent topic between federal government and provincial government. And India, the biggest challenge is around the distribution companies' health. And they are the one who are supposed to implement this policy at the at the district level or at the port level or wherever one wants to build the project. And they are currently not on the same page as the government on banking or wheeling, and they have their own constraint. But what has happened is due to raising of this issue frequently with the central government, they had two sessions in the last 15 days, one with the main stakeholder of energy secretary and policy makers at state government in presence of the minister, and the second session, which is a quarterly meeting with the energy minister and energy secretary in Udaipur. So a lot of those issues are discussed openly, and currently central government is looking at making it a proposal where it's a win-win, including can it be considered to do the banking at the CTU level itself or using POSOCO itself, which is used for scheduling today, to do the banking. And my confidence is that based on the passion of our country's leadership, that some of these major challenges of alignment between states and central government would be over, and we will see that few projects go into the FID stage or etc. early next year. So that's where I am on this.
I think, Vineet, it's a beautiful point that you made that, we should not be under pressure to bring down costs and avoid the mishaps of the past, if I may say so, and let the real price be discovered, which is extremely important for a sustainable growth, I think, of any technology or any resource that we are looking at. So lovely point, and, we will talk more about it. So Rabhi, just coming to you, World Bank as well as IFC is involved globally in the green hydrogen scenario. And I'm aware because I've worked with IFC as well across, South Asia. What do you think are some of the key lessons or takeaways from how the development is being seen around the world that we can carry back for India?
Thank you so much, Anvesha. Yeah, I think, the first and foremost point is that it's no one-size-fits-all approach. So every country is grappling with their own challenges, the resources, the patterns, and how they can leverage upon it so that the gap between grey and green hydrogen can be bridged. At the moment, hydrogen per se is not a new technology. It's how to make it green. I think there is where the thrust lies, right? So how do we handle that part becomes the heart of the discussion. And in that context, what we have been noticing that, countries are taking forward whatever the ecosystems they have in place. For example, if I take an example of Chile is heavily private sector driven. Government is just a pure facilitator with very, kind of a ecosystem provision kind of an approach that they follow. So there, for instance, how World Bank is supporting them is to leverage upon the existing ecosystem, provide a hydrogen facility which can bring down the cost to the private sector players by introducing risk mitigation instruments, and to provide more comfort to these players to come and invest. So that is something that we must look at when we are looking in India also. Of course, customizations, as I said, is very important. Another example coming from Europe and specifically Germany is that, to bring down the costs, the green hydrogen hubs or valleys are being proposed, which I think is again very much applicable in case of India, because storage transportations are still a missing piece in this green hydrogen puzzle. Cost itself is so high without including storage and transportation. If you put that also as an additional burden, the economy or the entire, generation side or the production side of green hydrogen will fall apart on day one itself. So how we can bring the generators or producers closer to the consumption centers is very much apparent for any country, and specifically for India. How we, stitch the deal together to reduce the costs, to reduce the dependence on storage and transportation as much as we can. So that is another important segment that we must look at. Another one is coming from UK as well as to some extent from Germany, is the introduction of contracts for differences, right? That is again a very innovative concept, and how this should be customized in case of India becomes extremely important. we have seen in the power markets, India has been grappling for, more than a decade now on introducing this kind of instrument. But when we talk about green hydrogen and accelerating its uptake, this becomes even more important. So we all need to think through with the policymakers, with the regulators, learn on the experiences of UK and Germany on how we can take it forward and introduce such kind of instruments become very, very important. Some of the countries like Australia, as we have noticed, they have become more or less like an export hub. They are exporting to Korea, to other countries. If I bring synergies in India to this kind of concept, some of the port states like Kerala and all, they are very much, eager to develop their maritime industry to cater to these demands. They want to be future ready. So there are a lot of such, examples which exist in other parts of the world. Not every example would fit as is in the case of India. Not all the examples in one country would be fitting for India. It has to be mix and match and customized further so that this technology can find its way. I strongly believe, as you asked Sanjeev ji, the very first question, I would say that it's a Swiss Army knife, which will provide a lot of solutions if deployed in a right manner. And as Vineet was saying, with the cost economics in place. Otherwise, we keep putting more and more support to it. Initially, it's fine, but going forward, I think its sustainability is very important. And this is what policymakers are definitely cognizant about.
Thanks, Surbhi. And, I'm definitely seeing rich experiences already emerging around the world. I think, if a compendium can actually be made of what all is happening, it will be immensely useful. So that's something maybe that the World Bank can look at, because not only India, but some of the other emerging economies, I think it would be very useful to take, learn from some of these experiences. So, Jim, all eyes are on US after the IRA. So what do you see as US's play in the global low carbon hydrogen and derivative market as we move forward?
So I think it definitely creates a significant opportunity for the United States to become a global leader. When we think of what the IRA is doing in the marketplace, if you look at both blue and green hydrogen, prior to the IRA, people thought about blue hydrogen and said that there's a high potential here to take our existing gray hydrogen production and retrofit it with CCS or CCU to enable that to become a low carbon hydrogen solution more readily than building new infrastructure for green hydrogen. However, I think the IRA has done a couple pretty significant things. And the first I would highlight is the IRA sort of looks at the emissions in a numeric basis and asks the question, how much CO2 emissions do we have? How many kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen produced? And it also looks at it on a life cycle basis. So essentially from wellhead to production is that viewpoint. So when you come back to what it does and compare blue and green hydrogen, I think you look at the tiers and you say, okay, the first tier is if we have less than 0.45 kilograms of CO2 emissions for each kilogram of hydrogen produced, that qualifies for the highest credit level, the $3 credit level. I think a quick side note here is that there are requirements for prevailing wages in the construction of the facility, as well as apprenticeship programs. I would expect those to be readily met. And so the real question is then coming back to the carbon intensity of the hydrogen we produce, which was also a big debate. Should we be thinking of hydrogen as specific sets of colors, or should we be looking at the numeric carbon? And so the IRA, I think, will greatly favors green hydrogen production over blue. Of course, it would support pink, which is nuclear-fueled hydrogen production. It also creates opportunities for turquoise hydrogen, which is by pyrolysis. And the difference for blue versus green is when you look at the tiers and you think of blue as being CCS applied to gray production, and gray production, which is just traditional steam methane reformation, you produce 9 to 10 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of H2. And so to achieve a 0.45 kilogram rate, you need over a 95% capture rate, which is very ambitious, if not probably unlikely to be achieved. Even qualifying for the second tier, which gives you $1 per kilogram credit, it would require an 85% capture rate, which is also extremely high, especially when you think of it as considering life cycle emissions. And so green is now able to target a $3 a kilogram incentive. And if you think of blue, SMRs with CCS, if you can hit, say, a 75% capture rate, it'd be worth 60 cents per kilogram of H2. When you go back historically before the IRA and ask where were prices converging, there were some viewpoints that green and blue could converge to a similar place. Eventually, they could be potentially competitive with gray. But now with the Inflation Reduction Act, you essentially see maybe green's going to get a $3 a kilogram credit, whereas blue is going to trail behind pretty significantly. And so I think from an export market view, this greatly creates an opportunity for the US to export green hydrogen into markets like Europe and potentially even Asia, depending on which port you're departing from in the US. So I think it's really changed the outlook of what's going to happen here. And I think it'll be a positive benefit to the world, and it'll be certainly great for the US. I also do think you'll see other industries crop up around this, from electrolyzers to tracking and understanding the carbon intensity. Of course, will be key to say, well, what was the carbon intensity of this hydrogen produced? And so if you go back before the IRA, you'd say blue and green potentially competitive. I think with the passage of the IRA, I think it shifts the marketplace much more towards green, and does open the door to some of the other emerging technologies like pyrolysis.
Great, thanks, Jim. And yeah, so I think you very well explained the fact that how the mood or the visibility suddenly changes from blue hydrogen to green hydrogen, despite the fact that US is gas producing, and one would have thought that the focus would be on blue hydrogen. But obviously now that the focus, because of IRA, is now shifting to green hydrogen, it also means that potentially US can enter the global trade in green hydrogen or ammonia in a big way. So that's something to watch out for. Vineet, going back to you, with US clearly now going to make the world nervous, how do you see India's positioning as far as the export market for green hydrogen and green ammonia is concerned?
So first of all, I think as per WTO also, the global export market should be at the fair to each and every participating country. So my sense on interacting with the US official is that they've still not decided if IRA benefits would be given for the export market. So there is a fair bit of ambiguity around that. Otherwise, US has a chance of monopolizing the export market created by Japan, Korea, and Europe. And in our view, if India has to succeed into the export market, India should play with its strength, but at the same time, India should be cognizant of the global policy, and its policy should be derived by taking into consideration what kind of incentive or support other countries are providing. Indian exports can be very competitive, and in my sense, when I talk to my friends who are talking about hydrogen hubs in Australia and Middle East, their biggest challenge is they are all coming to me and seeing how to even run 2,000 or 3,000 megawatt single project. Because when you are doing even a gigawatt project, you are looking at installing 35 lakhs or more than 3.5 solar panels. And then if you have to clean these solar panels, you need resources. And to align all these panels so that they can be cleaned by, say, automatic robots. And in addition to that, if you look at all the technology providers for green ammonia, green methanol, whether it is Haldar Topsoe, KBR, or Casale, or Ude, most of their back office and engineering skills currently resides in India. So in terms of skilled and unskilled workforce for renewable energy, green ammonia, green hydrogen, India is blessed with the maximum number of resources across the world. So that will be the one of the biggest strengths. Second, the ecosystem for generating renewable energy at massive scale, which is required for making green hydrogen and its variant successful. India is very well capable of. It's the only country which has 3,000 megawatt of solar park, or have developers who have built 1,250 megawatt or higher projects in India. And we have actually availability of both wind and solar resources, which are complementary to each other. And the desert of Thar alone and some part of other northwestern parts of India would be sufficient enough to power the entire Asia. So I think that land availability, which is becoming a huge constraint in Europe, Japan, and Korea, we are blessed with degraded land and the desert land. So we are seeing a strong interest from European and Japanese to source green ammonia and its variant from India. Even Indian government is having a discussion at G2G level to ensure that some level of agreements are signed up. And in addition to that, they are creating the local market. So I think the reason Indian government is looking at the export to begin with is driven by the India's passion and vision that we should be energy independent and energy security and become totally import independent by 2047. And that can only happen if you start proving your molecule at the global level. So my sense is that that the world should look at developing a collective framework and creating a level playing fields for every country to participate and become the energy provider for the world. World does not want to make the same mistake like what it did in the OPEC, which is a glorified cartels of oil producing nation. And eventually, if you look at most of the businesses, they don't care for world at large. They look at maximizing their own profit and stakeholders' profit. And if you consider just what OPEC does, is it has almost a tap to increase or decrease the price, and they don't care for the global economy per se. And one of the reason why Europe is getting severely impacted is because of their over dependence on a single country for their energy supply, and no other country should make similar mistakes. And if the global leaders are serious about energy transition, they should create a level playing field which is fair to India as well, and that way India would succeed. I've been in this industry from inception, and I've never seen this level of commitment by Indian government to make it successful. In fact, Kapil would know that we all get reviewed by the senior most office in the country that you guys have planned. What's your plan to award the EPC? Who are your customers? When is your financial closure happening? Are you facing any issue with land acquisition? Is there any bottleneck around transmission? So if you would have got this level of support from day one in renewable space, probably we would have been 10x bigger than what we are. So I'm very confident that India would figure out itself, but the world needs to ensure that India can succeed in global transition story.
Nice, Vineet, and really heartening to know that there is actually not only broad directional policy making, but the government is actually getting down to brass tacks. Texas 60 gigawatt green hydrogen hub is probably the most ambitious project on green hydrogen that the world has seen till now. I would love to know what are the innovations that you are seeing in the hub, other than the PTC element, that we have already spoken about. And what are the strategic advantages you think that the hub can have vis-a-vis, other hubs around the world? Jim.
So I think there's a series of advantages that you'll see that support hydrogen hubs here in the US, in Texas, and in other parts of the world. And I think as the panel has mentioned, the value of having the wind and the solar, the combination of the renewable energy to produce low-cost electricity that's green to produce the hydrogen. I think there are some unique things when we think about Texas and other parts, in particular, when we think of the geological formations that exist potentially for storing hydrogen, if you're thinking of blue hydrogen for the carbon capture, for the sequestration aspect of that. There are just areas of the world that have geological formations, the salt deposits that can be mined out, that provide for storage for those gases. I think also when you think uniquely within Texas, if you look within the greater US infrastructure, a large portion of the hydrogen produced in the US is already produced in Texas in the Gulf Coast area. If you think of the pipelines and the infrastructure, a disproportionate amount of it is also in that area. If you think of the project management skills and capabilities for engineering and designing and constructing the large projects, the large infrastructure projects, you have a host of companies out of Houston who play an enormous role in that space. And you also have permitting capabilities and processes and inspections that are well established, that they're familiarized with large oil project construction. And so the analog here is quite similar. And so it brings a lot of unique capabilities together. And so we think Texas has significant advantages for developing these projects. And it's not just sort of those man-made capabilities from skills and experience, but also the geological formations. And you'll find those in other parts of the world as well. And Texas itself has abundant solar and wind resources, like many other countries.
Yeah, so that really puts, I think, the Texas hub at a very formidable level in terms of the strategic competitive advantages, for sure. Couple, I'm going to change gear now and talk about manufacturing. How do you see the whole electrolyzer manufacturing story play out in India? Can India gain an early advantage and get a strategic advantage over there?
So first, possibly many of the things what I would have thought of, Vineet has already said about benefits, what you can have in India for that. Possibly this is the time we are not a follower, we can be a leader. So this point of time, it gives us an opportunity to be a leader in manufacturing specifically, rather than doing it more from a perspective that every time we do stuff, but we follow. Because where we are, most of the world is at the same point. The present geopolitical situation also gives us an added benefit to the whole thing, because the world would look at India as in manufacturing thing. Government of India has been running Atmanirbhar, which is your self-reliance on how you do projects, how do you do manufacturing within country, not only from perspective what we are speaking today about green hydrogen or renewable energy, but in all other segments and domains. At the same time, where we need to be a little more careful about it is possibly while we have this whole theme of Atmanirbhar, we also need to do a little bit of Atmanirikshan. So which is what I would say possibly a little bit of self-introspection, that where we are and where we want to be, if we really want to be a manufacturing leader, and not only make products which are used in India, but products which are then supplied possibly across the globe. And that is where I would say possibly more investments in research and development, more investment of time, manpower, and understanding from global standards. And how do you tweak or implement those standards and policies in India, for that matter. Also, a more focused approach towards quality where we have seen some of those, when you also said some mishaps happened in past. So we have to be a little more cautious this time if we are creating a hub for which can supply manufacturing needs of the globe. We really need to focus more on quality. Government of India is running these performance link incentives. We already have these announced for solar modules and advanced chemistry battery cells. And possibly something similar is on the lines for electrolyzer manufacturing. And these incentives have really helped in an overall industry participation as to how the manufacturing ecosystem can be developed. We have land, we have sufficient skilled manpower, we have access to capital, we have access to technology in form of JVs, and then possibly developing some of them within the country. It's time now that we use PLI schemes and set up these manufacturing hubs. And as what was just spoken, how do we create these hubs near to ports possibly, from perspective that it can be used then for possibly supply domestic as well as then from an export orientation. But I think there are some elements which are already present and some of them which are easily to be acquired kind of a thing, but with little bit of caution. And we are there to then supply and become a manufacturing hub for the globe.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges often is which technology to bet on. So, because we have AWE and PEM right now, but also on the horizon or probably getting realized is SOECs, the solid oxide electrolyzers, the AEM. So as long as, some kind of a flexibility can be built into the manufacturing facilities, so that it can evolve with the technology, evolution. I think that would help India as well as, hedge bets. So there also innovation and how to make these manufacturing facilities flexible would also be, I think, extremely important to add to your research point.
Definitely. And I think we should design lines, and Vesha, in a way that replacing couple of equipments within the line, you are quickly able to move from one technology to the other. And it doesn't require a whole set of investment again when you look at in different technology.
Refineries represent today one of the most important demand segments for green hydrogen. Do you see any challenges practically in the uptake of green hydrogen?
Yeah, that's true. And Visha, the refinery is very important segment in government policy also. National Hydrogen Mission. This is one of the major contributor when it comes to the demand. And it's, you know it very well that whatever crude we process, 1% of that is the hydrogen. So roughly in India, around over 2 million tons of refinery, hydrogen is used in refinery. And as we already discussed, that most of it based on SMR. And SMR is one, it has certain advantages right now. One is that it's a very well-established technology. And second is in terms of costing also, is very, very competitive. Now, the one major challenge which comes in greening hydrogen in our refinery is the cost element. And cost element, if we couple it with the technological aspect, which Kapil also talked about, you also talked about, that each technology, be it PEM or for that matter, alkaline, have their own advantages and disadvantages. And we don't really know that, and the life cycle is very long, 10 years, even more, as Kapil talked about, 25 years. So if we look at it, the cost is becoming very important. And while we are evaluating, we are also realizing that the government of India has brought policy of banking, but state to the DISCOMs have their own policies that adds on to the cost. And we add on to the storage part, as Jim also brought out, becomes should be brought out much more costlier. So these are the couple of challenges we need to look at it. And but what we feel is that right now, government of India has serious intentions, and industry also, be it Indian or others, we have serious intention that we will like to go and start at a pilot level, but implement in a much larger scale. But we need some support from government, as Kapil talked about PLI scheme, and some kind of BGF funding can be made available initially for refineries, so that we are able to scale it up. May not be 100%, but yes, maybe 5%, 10% or 15%. So we feel that refineries would be very, very important fulcrum in India's aspiration to become a global hub when it comes to the green hydrogen. Thanks.
Thank you, Sanjeev. So, going over to you, Surabhi, I would love to hear from you on your views on public-private participation or public-private partnership in this segment. We've seen PPP models, being really successful in many segments, especially the infrastructure segments. What do you see as its role in the whole green hydrogen story?
That's a very interesting question, Vesha. We are almost like on a daily basis talking to MNRE about how the World Bank can pitch in with their financing support and scale up the green hydrogen. And this is the question that we keep deliberating with them, that how the PPP models can be brought from other segments, from other technologies and be replicated here in India. So a lot of things that could be done. It is very important to understand the roles that both public and private sectors are playing in this value chain. We have been observing that private sector players are quite keen. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that hydrogen is nothing new. It's about how we are producing hydrogen becomes important. So technology-wise, it's established. It's that how we bring firmer RE capacities into the market that can help COFs to be achieved for the given electrolyzer technology, and how the off-takers are incentivized to offtake, the production of the green hydrogen. So there is where I think, the role of government fits really well to bring down the costs. As I mentioned in my earlier response also, that risk mitigation instruments can be assured the offtake guarantees to these generators that yes, there would be X million metric tons of demand will be assured, and hence you come and set up your facilities. So how the government can come in, we need to identify the entry points where public sector has comparative advantage. And one such thinking that we have, at least on the green hydrogen space, that for green hydrogen hubs, can we replicate the solar park model? Can we bring the synergies from the success of the solar park scheme to the green hydrogen hubs that are to be developed? Where private sector players will definitely be setting up their shop on the production side because they are very much closer to the demand centers. So how we manage the storage, the transportation in interim? How can the land and other resources be made available? So that I think is one very important aspect that one needs to look at. The other role that, what we have seen from our past experiences, that any new technology comes with its own perceived, hesitations for the stakeholders to adopt. So first mover risks, how can those be absorbed by the public sector players become very important. These demonstration projects really help in opening up the space. For instance, if we, look at, solar wind hybrid with battery storage technologies, at least as far as I can recall, 6 to 8 years ago is when we started this discussion with SECI. And there were not, even a pilot level project at that point in time. There was one which was done in South India, but very small scale, but not at the large scale, right? So we supported SECI in furthering their thinking to bring various technologies together to promote firmer RE power supply. And based on that, then they launched multiple tenders. So this is the way that generally we try to have the initial investments tailor-made that can help bring more confidence, not only for the investors, as in like the generators or the producers, but also for the financial intermediaries. Because ultimately, as one of our fellow panelists says, that there are huge requirement of financing, and financiers will generally support at competitive rates the proven technologies. They attach risk premium. How we can bring them into the confidence. So our early investments, probably through public sector initially, having a demonstration effect for the private sector players, including financial intermediaries, can play a role. Solar park scheme becomes important. How we can further R&D. I think Kapil raised it, this point, and it is very pertinent, very important. Skill set. Again, a very, very, limited attention is being paid to that particular segment. Whether we talk about solar or now for batteries and later for green hydrogen, we are going to face those kind of challenges. So PPP model is beyond only just one location, one site or one model, but it's like mix of multiple interventions that both public and private need to take forward together. One Another point which I think is extremely important that, again, Kapil had raised about safety and quality perspectives. How can government provide those testing and certification facilities, or can have an authorizing environment again for such kind of labs to be established, where the private sector players can come and get their products authorized, approved, and launched in the market, giving more confidence to the end of takers that yes, this can work and this is up to certain global standards. So all these things are very, very, very important. So PPP is not like limited to certain segments in the green hydrogen value chain. It's spread across.
No, Surbhi, I think these are, great examples of how, the government can support and handhold, the private sector. Although Vineet did message that I think we are strong as private sector as well. Of course, I think both have their own advantages that they bring to the table, but it has to be collaborative. Vineet, you would like to add something there? I saw you putting down some messages.
No, they just crowd out. If you look at the cost of capital, so SVNL, NTPC, NHPC, if you have the cheapest cost of capital, you solve for the problem where private sector is not active. So my challenge is that you create a level playing field for private operator. You provide the land and transmission for free to NTPC and make them compete with the private player onto the bid. That is totally unfair and ridiculous. Any country which wants its citizens to flourish and unleash the abundance should create a level playing field between private and public sector. Unfortunately, the challenge is that even World Bank, IFC, and many others, they believe very strongly, they actually provide the cheapest source of funding to the public sectors. And when they come to the private sector, they would expect us to follow the standards of the best companies in the world in name of ESMS, EHS, and would expect the highest returns. They say that private sector operation is to maximize the profit. Public sector is for the larger good, as if what we do doesn't do good. We create thousands of jobs. When we provide electricity access, it's inversely proportional to poverty. We reduce poverty. Probably some of our philanthropic projects are more effective than what public sector would ever provide. So my request is, country has limited resources. They should be maximized. So if NTPC, NHPC, and SVNL has lowest cost of capital, please go ahead and buy the DISCOM of Tamil Nadu, which is struggling for a while. Provide the liquidity to the state government and make that into a most successful story in India, and maybe a role model for how public sector strength in the central government and state government can work together to solve the biggest problem of the country in terms of energy security. So that is why when someone tries to say that private sector currently does not have the full expertise to make it successful, I tend to disagree. And my personal view is probably there are a lot of large conglomerate who do far, far better and superior in green ammonia, green hydrogen than PSU would be able to do. And their strength should be used to solve for the problem which exists in the DISCOM and space right now.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mittal. I think, sorry.
Anisha, I'll just add one point. I think we are missing out one point. That's not public sector versus private sector. I think what we're talking, there are a lot of synergies where probably both of them can work together. Public sector brings management strength, very deep financial pocket, as well as able to get very competitive pricing. Whereas private sector brings a lot of agility and they can move very fast. So I personally feel that if two works together, I think there can be a very complementary combination where we can work together.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just one last clarification from my side. So our environmental social policies are applicable equally to both public and private players.
And I've seen that in action. I've seen that in action, doing a lot of work on the public sector side as well with Surbhi. So I completely see that. I think the point is, I think well made by all the panelists. We do need PPP, but at the same time, the whole structure should not be vitiated. Everybody has to play to their strengths and the strengths that they bring to the table, because finally it's about collaboration and make the story happen for India. And with that, we will bring to the close of the round. If there is any comment that anybody wants to make on what really needs to be done, just one or two steps, or in making green hydrogen a resounding success for India.
Well, for India to succeed in this, we need to ensure that our policy is enforced at the lowest level, like at the district level. And we are making very good policy. I think in some sense, I feel very pleased that government is taking all its learning from developing renewable energy market to develop the green hydrogen and its variant market, where we are creating a marketplace. The way the tender document is currently designed and the pay or take agreement is written is actually very strong, bankable, probably better than even contract for difference, which we have seen in Europe. I think the government need to do one thing is like they did first RE Invest, where they got all the stakeholder. So get banks to commit on the debt which they would be providing, get them to sign a commitment letter in front of our Honorable Prime Minister, get the state's government to agree to provide the land, get Power Grid to build the transmission network to evacuate so much of power, get the port authority to ensure that there is ammonia line or methanol lines available at their port and sufficient capacity of switchyard, transmission line and land available at the port. Get fertilizer ministry to agree to purchase certain quantum of green ammonia, get oil ministry to agree. So getting all the stakeholder on the common platform and get them to sign a kind of sapat patra like what was done in the renewable sector. And that would create a huge success story. We have been talking about it for a few years now. I used to tell even in your one of your KPMG's conference, I used to tell that we used to do the electrolysis experiment in our chemistry and physics lab both. And I'm looking forward to a day when our cars will be driven by water. And people were laughing at me that I'm just gone nuts and a bit crazy. But I think the day has come when water would be used as a fuel, and hydrogen and oxygen would change almost the entire industrial structure, the way we used to work. And India has the greatest opportunity ever to capture significant market share, as all the fellow panelists were saying, and Kapil specifically mentioned, that we should not miss the bus. I think so far the industry was moving very slow and steady in the renewable energy state, but I think hydrogen provides an opportunity where adding 50 gigawatt a year would be real. But for that to happen, that holistic ecosystem and ensuring that all stakeholders sign in front of visionary of the country would ensure that it all falls into the place and we really succeed and we walk the talk.
Thank you. Would anybody else want to add? I think we can take one more comment. Kapil, you're on mute.
All I can add to what Vineet just mentioned is on basis on the holistic view. You know, even on an ecosystem, we need to take a very holistic view. That we've been speaking largely on hydrogen production, even in such forums or possibly even during our pilot projects as well. It's time that we focus on the upstream, midstream, and the downstream. And each of the sector needs to take a holistic view, because probably there is a delay in production of green hydrogen. Can we create the infrastructure for storage and transportation as part of midstream? By the time the technology is in place for manufacturing of electrolyzer or for green hydrogen production, I already have the infrastructure which can be used for storage and transportation, and possibly all. How do I then use hydrogen as fuel or feedstock in the industrial application also can be looked at from now, because these are some long-term views what large industries needs to take. And these are very large from a perspective and very hard to abate. Otherwise, it would have achieved majority of their decarbonization goals by now with just electricity as an element, because many of them already committed or pledged for RE100. They are not able to get to that level because these are sectors which are hard to abate. So holistic view on the ecosystem, which will have how production will happen, how storage and transportation will be done, and how these downstream application will be more adaptable, needs to be looked by serious players in the country.
And Vesha, one last point from my side to summarize. I think the crux of the entire green hydrogen value chain is RE, firm supply of RE. If we can fix it, rest of the things will start to fall into the place. That is what my bottom line would be.
Absolutely. And being a renewable energy professional, I spotted that 2 years back when we analyzed the levers, but you're totally right about that. So
that's why we use you, Anvesha, to convince Amitabh Khan. So you have done a fab job of bringing the first policy, and your contribution would be written in the golden letter. So we are not going to forget that.
Yeah, we continue to work over there, and let's hope that we meet the requirements not only of the industry but of the country. So thank you so much, and I think I couldn't have had a better panel with such diverse perspectives, but who are actually in the thick of things. And there are very important takeaways that I'll just take a minute to summarize. First of all, hydrogen is not the be-all and the end-all. It is an incredibly important clean energy resource, but it will act in conjunction with other, energy forms that are over there. In terms of how we can gain strategic advantage, definitely bringing the cost down is an important element. Renewables form a very important part of it, and we need to make sure that we employ all the levers, whether it is on the generation side or the transmission side or the storage side or the hybridization side, to be able to bring down those costs, to improve the utilization. On the electrolyzer side, continuous R&D, bringing up the efficiencies, etc., is incredibly important. The point that Vineet made but at the same time, let's not be under pressure to come to the dollar dream. Let the real price be discovered so that whatever we do is sustainable and we don't fall, on our feet. There are extremely important learnings and experiences that are already emerging around the world, whether it is risk mitigation structures, the CFD mechanism, the hubs that are being developed, the strategic advantages that they are leveraging, which are innate to each country. We need to look into these experiences and make sure that our story is strong and we learn from them as well. Public-private participation and partnership is extremely important. It can happen in multiple ways, and there are strategic advantages that both sides bring to the table and strengths and weaknesses that both sides have. Important thing is to do this with a level playing field and to do this sustainably. Manufacturing story, India can become a leader over there, but it is important to think ahead, to have your own R&D, to utilize the skills where you have it, and at the same time, make sure that you plan for technology obsolescence by having as much flexibility as possible in your manufacturing lines. And finally, we can make this a huge success, but what is important is to understand the full value chain, the upstream, downstream part of it, and develop a sound ecosystem so that this is not a very short kind of a ride, but a long journey where we succeed in the long run. Thank you very much to the panel today and for the lovely discussions. And we look forward to more and more discussions as we move forward. Thank you.